Hello everybody, I am Mrs. Poppet and this is my place. I'm so happy to see that you came back today for another story because I really enjoy telling them to you. I have a very special one picked out for today. It's called The Three Little Men in the Wood. Have you ever heard this story? Well, if not, don't you worry because we're going to read it together. Let's begin. The Three Little Men in the Wood. Once there was a man whose wife died, and a woman whose husband died. They each had a daughter. The woman said to the man's daughter, "Tell your father that I would like to marry him. If he and I marry, you will have milk every morning to wash in and drink wine, and my own daughter will have water to wash in and water to drink." The girl went home and told her father what the woman said. The man said, "I don't know what to do. Marriage is a joy, but it's also a torment." He could not decide, so at length he pulled off his boot and said, "Take this boot with a hole in it, hang it on a nail, and pour water into it. If it holds the water, then I will marry the woman. But if the water runs through, I won't." The girl did this, and the hole in the boot blocked up, and the boot filled up with water. The girl told her father, who went and married the woman. The morning after the marriage, when the two girls woke up, there in front of the father's daughter was milk for her to wash in and wine for her to drink, and the woman's daughter had water to wash in and water for drinking. It was just like she promised. But on the second morning, both daughters had only water. And then on the third morning, the woman's daughter had milk and wine, while the man's daughter still only had water. The woman became bitterly unkind to her stepdaughter. She was envious because her stepdaughter was so beautiful and lovable, and her own daughter was ugly and repulsive. In the winter, when everything was frozen as hard as a stone and covered with snow, the woman made a dress out of paper. She called her stepdaughter and said, "Here, put on this dress. Go out into the woods and fetch me a basket of strawberries." "Good heavens," said the girl, "strawberries don't grow in the winter. The ground is frozen and snow has covered everything. And why am I to put on this paper dress? It is so cold outside that breath freezes. The wind will blow right through the paper." "Are you daring to contradict me?" asked the stepmother. "Do not show your face again until you have a basket of strawberries." Then she gave the man's daughter a little piece of hard bread and said, "This will last you through the day." But what she thought inside was, "You will die of hunger and cold, and I will never, ever have to see you again." The man's daughter was obedient. She put on the paper dress and went out with the basket. Far and wide there was nothing but snow. When she got into the woods, she saw a small house with three little dwarfs peeping out the window. She knocked modestly at the door and wished them a good day. They cried, "Come in, come in." She entered the room and seated herself on a bench by the stove, where she began to warm herself and eat her piece of hard bread. The dwarf said, "Can we have some too?" "Of course," she said, and gave them half. They asked, "What are you doing here in the winter forest in such a thin little dress?" "Ah," she answered, "I am looking for a basket of strawberries and cannot go home until I have found them." When she had eaten her bread, the dwarfs gave her a broom and said, "Sweep away the snow at the back door for us." Once she'd gone outside, they said to each other, "What shall we give her? She is so good and has shared her bread with us." The first said, "My gift will be that she grows more beautiful every day." The second said, "My gift will be every time she speaks gold pieces will fall out of her mouth." And the third said, "My gift is a king who will love her and marry her." The girl swept away the snow behind the little house, and what did she find but ripe strawberries, dark red in the pristine white world. Joyfully she gathered her basketful and thanked the little men, and she ran home to deliver the berries to her stepmother. When she went in and said hello, a piece of gold fell out of her mouth. She told what had happened to her in the wood. With every word she spoke, more gold pieces fell out of her mouth until the whole room became full. "Now look at her arrogance," cried the stepsister, "throwing gold around." But she was really envious and wanted to seek strawberries in the forest too. Her mother said, "No, my dear daughter, you might die of cold." But her daughter still wanted to go. So at last the mother gave in. She made her daughter a magnificent dress of fur, and she made her own daughter take bread and butter and cake. The girl went straight to the little house in the forest. The three dwarfs peeked out, but she did not greet them. Without speaking to them, she barged right into their house, seated herself by the stove, and began to eat her bread and butter and cake. "Give us some bread and cake," cried the little men. But the woman's daughter replied, "There's only enough for me, so I can't give any away." When she had finished eating, the dwarf said, "Here's a broom. Please sweep away the snow away from the back door for us." "Humph! Sweep for yourselves," she answered. "I'm not your servant." When she saw they were not going to make gold fall from her mouth, she left. The little men said to each other, "What shall we give her? She is so rude and has a wicked, envious heart. She won't do a good turn for anybody." The first said, "My gift is she will grow uglier every day." The second said, "My gift is that every time she speaks, a toad will spring out of her mouth." The third said, "My gift is that she will die a miserable death." The mother's daughter looked for strawberries in the forest, but didn't find any at all. So she went angrily home. She began to tell her mother what happened, but whenever she spoke, a toad sprang out of her mouth, to everybody's horror. Her mother became still more enraged. She thought of how to harm her husband's daughter, whose beauty grew more remarkable every day. One day the woman told her stepdaughter to rinse yarn by chopping a hole in the ice of the frozen river. The girl went out and cut the hole, but then a splendid carriage drove up, and it belonged to a king. The carriage stopped, and the king asked, "Beautiful one, who are you, and what are you doing?" "I am a poor girl, and I am rinsing yarn." The king felt compassion for the girl, and he fell in love with her face. He said to her, "Would you come away and marry me?" "Yes, with all my heart," she answered, for she was glad to get away from her stepmother and stepsister. She traveled with the king to his palace, and they had a magnificent, glorious wedding. A year later, the young queen had a son. Her stepmother had heard of her good fortune, and she came with her daughter to the palace, pretending to pay a visit with the young queen. But the king had gone out, and there was no one else around, so the wicked woman seized the queen's head, and her daughter seized her feet. They lifted her out of bed and threw her out the window into a stream below. Then the ugly daughter lay in the bed, and the woman covered her up right over her head. When the king returned home, the woman told him the queen was unwell and that he must let her rest. The king suspected no evil and did not come back until next morning. Then he talked with his wife, but when she answered him, toads leaped out from the bed instead of gold pieces. He asked what this could mean, but the woman said it was just the illness and it would soon stop. During the night, a palace kitchen boy saw a duck come swimming up the stream. It came in and asked, "Where is my baby?" He answered, "The baby is sleeping in the cradle." Then the duck took the form of the queen and went upstairs to nurse the baby. Once she'd tucked the baby back in bed, she swam away again in the shape of a duck. She came again the next night, and then on the third night she said to the kitchen boy, Go and tell the king to swing his sword 3 times above me." The kitchen boy ran and got the king, who came with his sword and did as the duck asked. At the third swing, his wife stood before him, strong and healthy as she'd been before. The king was amazed and joyful. The, the next day he called the queen's stepmother before him and asked her, "What does a person deserve who drags someone out of bed and throws them into the water?" "A wretch like that deserves nothing better," answered the woman, "than to be put in a barrel stuck full of nails and rolled downhill into the river." The king said, "You have just pronounced your own sentence." He ordered a barrel to be brought, and the woman to be put in with her daughter, and the top was hammered on, and the barrel was rolled down the hill to the river. They were never seen again, and the king and the queen lived happily ever after. Wasn't that a good story? People really should be nice to each other because it is much better for everybody in the world. But I really hope you enjoyed this story, and I will be more than happy to tell you another one tomorrow. So come back, and I will see you then.